This is the new Peugeot 208, and judging by the recent success of the 3008 and 508 Fastback, this has got a lot to live up to.
That's because Peugeot is having a renaissance. Gone are the days of it building ugly, flimsy, undesirable cars, and now they're making ones people actually want to own. But making a fashionable SUV like the 3008 desirable is one thing, making a Super Mini sexy is quite another.
But before I tell you whether you should be ditching your Fiestas and rushing out and buying one of these, make sure you subscribe to the channel, switch on those notifications and leave your comments below.
So here it is then, and it's fair to say Peugeot is throwing pretty much everything, including the kitchen sink, at taking on and beating the Fiesta, Polo, Seat Ibiza and Europe's best-selling Super Mini, the Renault Clio. There's a smart interior, a brand new platform, and you can buy a petrol 208, a diesel one, and even an all-electric version. And then there's the styling.
Now gone is the slightly bulbous shape of the 206, the 207 and the first generation 208, and in comes a design that's far better proportioned. It's also a design that references Peugeot's heritage. Things like the 208 badge here on the bonnet harks back to the 504 Coupe, but it's round the side where things get really interesting. It's in particular this C-pillar. Now it's a strong shape, isn't it? Does it remind you of anything? How about this badge here? All these big black wheel arch extensions. It's like the 205 GTI, isn't it? Now, it's not a pastiche, it's just a modern reinterpretation of that classic car. And I think it looks absolutely fantastic. Now, whilst the outside may reference old Peugeot models, there is nothing old in here whatsoever, because my word, what a fantastic interior this is. And this interior really does set a new benchmark in the class for design, because there's nothing else that looks like it, is there? It makes a VW Polo look decades old. Now let's talk a little bit about the tech. So in the centre here you get your usual touch screen. It uses the familiar system we've seen in Peugeots and Citroëns of old, and it's not the best system in the world. For instance, the heating controls are buried away in a sub-menu, but it does look pretty cool. And for this 208, Peugeot's introduced a new feature. So you use your 3 fingers there, prod the screen, and it takes you to the home menu. It's a little bit gimmicky, isn't it? But there's nothing gimmicky about the rest of the tech in here. Things such as the iCockpit screen in front of you. Nothing new, I hear you say, but in mid-level models and above in the 208, it has a 3D look to it. Now, it's a bit difficult to explain, but it looks really cool, and the functionality on it is great as well. Other cool features, well, there's a little panel here. Doesn't look particularly special, does it? But if you press it, it drops down and there's a little shelf. If you grab your mobile phone, it's a place for you to slot your mobile phone in so you can see it. Pretty cool, isn't it? And there's a USB-C charging port there, a conventional USB port there, so you can connect your phone up to the Apple CarPlay and the Android Auto, which comes as standard on this car as well. But if that's not good enough, it's the sense of quality in here as well. Yes, there are a few hard plastics here and on the top of the dash, but generally speaking, the fit and finish in here is absolutely brilliant and something you wouldn't expect in a Peugeot from 5 years ago, I can tell you. Another nice thing are the seats. Now, this is a GT line car, so you get these heavily bolstered sports seats, but look at the material quality in here. Nice bits of leather, contrast stitching, nice fabrics. This is a really, really nice place to be.
While the front seems massive for a small car, in the back it's a slightly different story. Because of a lower roofline, headroom is a little tight if you're over 6 foot, and the boot is now a little smaller than the old 208s. Now it's only really average. So the new 208 looks great on the outside and on the inside, and that interior certainly has the wow factor. It's also surprisingly posh and well made too. With all that in mind, surely the new 208 is good to drive.
Well, the answer to that is no. And I don't mean it's a bad car to drive whatsoever, it just hasn't got the same sort of wow factor like the interior, for instance. Let's start with the good. Well, we've got the 1.2 here, 3-cylinder turbocharged petrol, the higher output one, the 130 horsepower one. For the time being, that is the most powerful petrol engine you can buy. And like we've seen in lots of other Peugeots, this engine is really very good indeed. It picks up really nicely, feels very urgent, very, very fizzy, and it's matched up to a really good gearbox. Now, you're probably expecting me to be driving a 6-speed manual, but I'm not, because the 6-speed manual, in actual fact, the gear change in that is quite rubbery and a bit imprecise. We've got the new gearbox here, the 8-speed automatic. 8 speeds in a little Super Mini. Mad, isn't it? But 8-speed automatic gearbox, and honestly, it just changes gear almost imperceptibly. It makes this car really very refined indeed, and that brings me on to the best thing about this car, is that it feels incredibly, I wouldn't go so far as saying luxurious, but it feels very, very refined and very, very cosseting. At motorway speeds, this car is incredibly quiet, and the ride in this car, for the most part, is very good. Around town, it can get a little bit, it can sort of crash into things a little bit, but it is a small car after all. But for the most part, the ride in this car is very comfortable indeed. Another thing that's very comfortable are these seats. Now, it's not quite as bad as the old 208, which you felt as though you were sitting in an old lady's armchair, but this, very comfortable, very springy, but also very sort of supportive at the same time. Like I say, this is a very comfortable and refined car to drive.
The 1.2 130 is just one engine in the range though. You can have a 75 or a 99 bhp 1.2 litre turbo as well, and if you really want a diesel, there's a 99 bhp 1.5. The diesel is a little gruff, but it's nicely punchy, and it should return up to 70 mpg and emit just 84 grams per kilometre of CO2. But if that's a little bit too last century for you, there's also an all-electric E208. Because the 208 was designed to be offered as an EV from the outset, its packaging is all but identical to the petrol and diesel versions. The electric motor sits under the bonnet, while instead of the fuel tank, the 50 kilowatt-hour battery pack lies under the rear seats. Peugeot says it'll manage 211 miles on a full charge.
Okay, right, the bad things. Firstly, it's the steering. Now, the steering in this car is very, very light, which is great around town, but it doesn't quite weight up enough on faster sections of road. It also feels a bit sort of gloopy. It doesn't feel as smooth as it should. And also, we've got the typical iCockpit problem here, with the small steering wheel being in the way of the dials in front of you. Now, the 208, it's got a lot better than it was in the original 208, but it's still not quite there. Now, if you like to have your steering wheel low down, it won't be a problem whatsoever. But me, personally, I like to have the steering wheel up high, and when I do that, it means that I can't see these absolutely fabulous 3D dials. Other things I don't like, well, it's the visibility, actually. There is an absolutely whacking blind spot here, these massive pillars. It's particularly bad here, even worse on that side. And the view out the back isn't that good either.
Don't get me wrong, the new 208 is a sizable leap on from its predecessor. And while the Ford Fiesta is unlikely to be losing its #1 spot in the sales charts anytime soon, the 208 does have its merits. You see, while the driving experience is pretty unremarkable, the design and quality of the interior gives the 208 a likeable charm, and it's another winning product from Peugeot. If you like this review, then watch our videos on the Renault Clio on the left and of the Peugeot E-Legend concept on the right. Click the Auto Express logo to subscribe to the channel, leave your comments below, and as ever, thanks for watching.